Colonel Mackenzie has not seen these aerials of the enemy's new line. Come around here, gentlemen. 3 miles deep, field fortifications, defences, artillery, the like of which we've never seen before. The 2nd are due to attack the line shortly after dawn tomorrow. They have no idea what they're in for. And we can't warn them. As a parting gift, the enemy cut all our telephone lines. Your orders are to get to the 2nd at Kwasi Wood, 1 mile southeast of the town of Lacust. Deliver this to Colonel Mackenzie. It is a direct order to call off tomorrow morning's attack. If you don't, it will be a massacre. We will lose 2 battalions. 1,600 men, your brother among them. You think you can get there in time?
Yes, sir.
And that's a clip from Sam Mendes' new film, 1917. And I'm delighted to say that Sam Mendes is here. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hi, Simon. I'm very well, thank you.
The last time we spoke, which was for Bond, I remember one of the main things I remember from that interview was that you'd said you'd finally locked it and walked away like a day before we'd done the interview.
Yeah.
Or it was really, really at the last minute. Yeah. So when did you walk away from this?
It wasn't much different, actually, to be honest with you. This was slightly crazy. I had in my head that we would start shooting in April and we would release by the end of the year. I'm a big believer in sort of, positive momentum. And because we didn't edit this movie in the conventional sense, anyway, we didn't sort of spend a nice, relaxed 8 weeks putting it together, I thought, well, we should be able to get it ready quite quickly. But that was very naive of me because I think the sound, musical landscape and the amount of visual effects really took me by surprise. So we didn't, in fact, finish it until about... from where we're talking now, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So it's fresh.
It's fresh. It's fresh. It's not rotten.
How would you describe it?
How would I describe it? Goodness me. An unconventional war movie, I suppose. It's not a combat film. There's very little bloodshed, so it's a very unusual war movie in that regard. And its shape and form are also very unconventional because it takes place in 2 hours of real time. And obviously there's also only one shot. So it operates more like a thriller or even at times a horror movie in terms of the way it establishes, it kind of thrives on a kind of low-grade tension. But, I never went to war and I'm fascinated in it, but I'm not fascinated in it because of the combat or even the historical manoeuvres. I'm fascinated because of what it does to human beings, because of all the situations that human beings have created for themselves. It's the one where you most see human beings stripped to their essence, stripped of social class, stripped of structures that exist outside war. And so for me, it's a film about friendship and a search for a brother, what it means to have a brother and what it means to go home. And above and beyond all the sort of technical discussions of how, the why is more to do with that friendship between the two men and what happens to them in these 2 hours.
And the why is a very interesting question, but presumably this is also one of the most personal films that you've ever made, maybe the most personal film. You just tell us a little bit about your grandfather, because that's really the start of this story.
Yes, it is. It's the first time I've ever written anything. I mean, of anything of substance, anyway, other than a couple of articles. And it's the first time I've ever made anything based on my family history. My grandfather fought in the war. He fought from 1916 to 1918. His name was Alfred Mendes. And he arrived there. He enlisted. He chose to go as a very young man, 17-year-old. And he never spoke about his experiences to his children, to my dad, effectively, or his brother. It was only in his 70s that he decided that he was going to let his grandchildren know about it. I think we pestered him and were excited and thought it was going to be glamorous. But all his stories, none of them were about heroism or bravery or victory. They were about luck and chance and coincidence and how thin the line was that separated him from his friend who was directly hit by a shell and just disappeared while standing next to him in the trench. And he said he couldn't bury him because there was simply nothing there. And obviously when you're 11 or 12, those sorts of stories make an impact. And he told us one story that just wouldn't let me go. It's not a big story. It was about carrying a message through no man's land. I can't even remember the details of it, but I remember just that image of that small man. He was a small man in the dusk carrying the message, and it wouldn't let me go. And I thought, well, when I finally gained the confidence to write something, that was the story I found that I wanted to write. I just had to find a situation in the war which fundamentally was a war of paralysis, a war of stasis, millions of men dying just jumping out of a trench and over 200 yards of land, really, which would allow for a sort of more epic journey, a mythic journey that took us across multiple landscapes.
And it's notable, I think, although it's only a small part of your film, that the generals are portrayed in a way, lions led by donkeys is the standard thing that we've seen a million times. Not so in this film.
No, I think, I was very conscious of trying to not correct exactly, because obviously there are certain commanding officers, Haig being the obvious one, who sent men over the top in the Somme, who perhaps were not the greatest military leaders of all time. But I was very conscious that there not be baddies in this film, that all of these men are lost in the fog of war. There's a pressure, I suppose, narrative pressure to sort of create a sort of Kurtz figure, perhaps, at the end, who's gone loco and rogue and is just sending men randomly over the top to their deaths. But I wanted even him, when they arrived at him, to be someone just struggling to do the right thing. I was very determined to try and kind of circumvent some of those cliches. For example, the cliche that says, men cowering in a trench about to go over the top to their certain death, right? I don't believe, people were frightened going over the top, people were adrenalized, but most of the people going over the top at various points thought they were going to victory, not to certain death. I think that's something we impose upon it, a kind of hazy, a kind of fog of nostalgia, that gets applied to this war a lot. And, it's a contemporary take on a historical period. It's not a documentary, it's not a history movie. You don't need to know anything about the First World War to go there. It's a contemporary cinematic style applied to this war, and contemporary score, and all the bells and whistles of contemporary cinema making, surround sound, IMAX, etc.
One of the reasons why the film is breathtaking is the way you've chosen to shoot it. I need to talk about Roger Deakins because he's like your right-hand man in this. And you've mentioned this kind of one-shot technique. You could have told the story of two young soldiers trying to pass on a message in a number of different ways. You chose to go down this one-shot technique. Why did you do that?
Well, first of all, Roger Deakins, as you say, is a kind of... I've taken to introducing myself as Roger Deakins' director. And one of the journalists, I just did an interview in the States, and he said, so other than winning Roger Deakins his second Academy Award, why did he choose to do this movie? So there was that as well. There was this feeling that I had that I wanted the audience to be locked into real time with the characters, to not escape, to not be able to get out, to experience time in a real sense, as much as they could, every second ticking by, every step of the way, and also feel the distances between things. And then the challenge was how to not make it monotonous, how to not make it repetitive, how to make sure we weren't just stuck behind two men walking along a trench, And so, for me, I wanted the movie to be sometimes subjective and very intimate, but other times also objective, and see the men in a vast landscape. And it was this constant dance between the camera, the characters, and the landscape. There were three things. And that was what Roger and I spent weeks and weeks and weeks talking about. And at the end of the day, there weren't any rules we discovered. It was just instinct. So for me, it was just trying to get a style that was particular to this film. And, we often talk either with members of the crew when I do movies about other movies that might look like the movie we're trying to make or inspire us, what have you. And I found that there was almost nothing with this movie that we could show except photographs of the period, because there were no movies that worked quite in this way. They're very, very brilliant subjective movies like Son of Saul, for example, which I thought was spectacular. And then there are movies shot on very, very wide angle lenses like The Revenant or Birdman, which also have a kind of slight sense of magic realism about them. Birdman, even though it's a continuous shot, actually takes place over several days and is a kind of weird dream, and also repeats the same locations again and again. But this one, we were just moving forward constantly. I wanted this feeling that we were being pulled through the movie, pulled through these landscapes, kind of a gravitational force in a way. And we knew we had to take every step with the characters. The horror movie trope is, I don't want to see what's around the next corner, but I have to go around the next corner. And that is the sort of tension this movie depends on all the time. And so it was very much its own thing. And I think if the thing I'm proudest of, in a way, is that we found the language that the movie required, and that the sense of content and form being inextricably linked. It was something that I felt we did better in this movie than we've done in anything else.
I do think the film is sensational. I absolutely...
Thank you.
It's a triumph, and I can't wait to go and see it again. I didn't want to go straight back in and see it again, because it's not one of those films. I think you have to leave it to settle and then go back and see it again. I only have one complaint, which I don't know how much control directors have over the trailer. And this comes up time and time again on the programme. People will have... I kind of think if it's in the trailer, we can talk about it because everyone has seen it, because it's out there. But I don't want to, because there is a scene that's in the trailer, which is in the last 5 minutes of the film, one of the most astonishing sequences that you have in there. And it has one soldier in it, and it's in the last 5 minutes. And I'm sort of annoyed, really, that people have seen that, because they should be leading up to that.
Of course. And it's
Can you not
constant.
stop this nonsense? That's basically what I'm saying.
We're making an enormous movie, Simon, with no real movie stars in the leads, and we have to try and get people to come and see it. And the reviews at that point have not come out. You don't know whether it's going to do well or not. So there's a constant debate about this, and I, as a storyteller, it literally gives me physical pain to think that I might have given away what happens in the story. But I figure always that images out of sequence don't actually tell you that much. The characters are split up at some point in this movie. It doesn't tell you absolutely what happens, and we did work very hard to make sure that one or two significant plot points were protected from the audience. But it is constant in every piece of material and every piece of you give away story. But I think it's something that's had to happen a little bit more in cinema now, because you're fighting the sort of week by week relationship that television has with an audience. It's a constant dialogue. You've got hours and hours of Game of Thrones. This goes back and forth, and you debate it and discuss it, and there's descriptions of the episodes in the papers, and then you go, it's like as if you need to be told what you have seen. You know what I mean? But that's part of the dialogue, and movies struggle with that because there's just one of them. You're building up expectation, but you're keeping your story alive all through that time until the movie releases. So it's a tricky one, not to... I mean, the other thing, of course, that was very weird for me, we didn't do a single edit in this movie, but the trailer's full of them. And so it's weird to see images that were not designed to be edited at all, suddenly cut. And, you think, well, that's not designed as a close-up. That's a moving shot, but you've used it as a close-up because you have to have that line in the picture. So it is very odd to see a sort of slightly bastardized version of your own movie before the public can see it.
Just finally, when you left Bond, you directed a couple of plays, and that was sort of very different. Obviously, you were getting out of your system. I would think this film must leave you feeling, what do I do next? It's been such a personal story for you. Does it make you want to go back to theatre?
Yes, I pretty much always, the moment I've done a movie, well, first of all, I want a holiday, and then I do hanker after the peace and relative tranquility of a rehearsal room. But this one's different, actually. I don't know what I'll think about making a conventional film after this. It's been such a different experience. It's unlike any other movie I've made. It's very, very challenging, difficult at times, very frustrating. There were definitely days when I thought, why have I done this to myself? There's a 10-minute take and 9 minutes and 40 seconds of absolutely perfect. Everything about it is magic. Never do it again. Oh, the camera operator just tripped. And you have to do it again from the beginning. That's it. There is no way to use that 9 minutes and 40 seconds of magic. And you're so used as a film director to being able to, I just have to do it once, and you've got it. It's like sort of capturing lightning in a bottle. So there were days like that. But then when you get it, it's so exciting. It seems like the only way to make a film. And there's something very special and unusual about it. So I don't know. I think probably it leaves me wanting to edit again, but to not take it for granted and perhaps edit in a different way.
Sam, we could talk for hours, but anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon.